to Understanding the Millennial Mindset, how generational misunderstanding is affecting business today. As a special treat to his Rockstar Academy subscribers, Mark Henson sits down with Brad Szollose for a casual conversation about the generational differences and technological influences that are disrupting business, academia, politics, and parenting. But first, why should we be concerned about the behavioral differences from one generation to the next? Well, if you haven't noticed, anyone under 39 years of age doesn't seem to obey the rules that previous generations have lived by for over 100 years. Case in point, in a recent 2014 Pew Research Center survey, it was discovered that only 26% of millennials want to buy a home. Since millennials are 80 million strong, imagine how this will affect the banking and mortgage industry. Not to mention new home construction, commercial insurance, along with furniture and appliance sales. This will also have a major impact on state and local municipalities, as you realize lower real estate taxes will impact the revenue collected to support the public school system, teachers' salaries, as well as pensions. And so far, I'm only talking about the United States. If you haven't figured it out already, generational misunderstanding costs millions in lower productivity, lost sales and retention, as well as the ability to pass key leadership roles on to the next generation. As a parent, it is a change in communication. And as a teacher or professor at a university, you may not realize you are attempting to apply 20th century methods of teaching onto 21st century minds that have been trained in all four learning styles. So without further ado, Mark Henson is called the Chief Imagination Officer of Sparkspace, an inspirational business retreat center that gives companies like Abercrombie & Fitch an off-site sanctuary for inspired creativity to thrive. A keynote speaker, author, and entrepreneur, Mark launched the Rockstar Academy, a weekly video podcast and group coaching program that gives today's teams the tools to become better leaders. Get ready. You are about to gain a deep understanding of today's digital generation. Knowing why they act the way they do is the first step in working with them. And please stay tuned at the end of this CD for a free bonus. Here is Mark and Brad.
Well, welcome to the Rockstar Academy, and as part of the Rockstar Academy, as you know, or maybe you don't, maybe this is your first time here, but if this is your first time here, you are in for a treat, because we have an expert interview today with a guy I've actually known for a couple of years. We actually ran into each other at a hotel and shared a steak dinner, of all things, a few years ago. And we've stayed in contact ever since, and I couldn't be more thrilled because Brad Szollose is the author of a book called Liquid Leadership, and this is an important book. It has a much longer, bigger title. Can you give the whole title?
Well, it's Liquid Leadership, and then the subtitle is From Woodstock to Wikipedia, Multi-Generational Management Ideas That Are Changing the Way We Run Things. Can you see that, Mark?
I can absolutely see that.
I like props, you know.
I'm glad you brought that prop because I only have it on my Kindle, so it doesn't come across quite the same.
Now, if you're in Korea, it also comes in a Korean edition, if you want. It just came out this year.
Do you autograph those in Korean?
No. But I'm learning it. I'm learning it just a little.
So obviously this is an important book because it deals with multi-generational issues in the workplace.
Right. From
a leadership perspective, but also what we want to talk to you a little bit about today is up and down that ladder, some of the things that happen. But just to kind of give us a little bit of the background, tell us what inspired this book. Where did it come from? And I know you spent, blood, sweat, and tears putting this thing together over a certain period of time. But what kicked it all off for you? What made you want to write this book in the first place?
It actually started probably about 15 to 17 years ago, Mark. I was on Wall Street. I started a .com company that specializes in design work and things like that. And we started to become an internet company back when nobody knew what the internet was. Remember 94, 95? It was just email or a static page. And before I knew it, we went from 2 business partners to 60 employees, and we went public on NASDAQ, and we raised about $7 million. And this all came from bootstrapping the operation and doing it on our own, just blood, sweat, and tears, really. It's what went into making the company. But I started to notice that there was a huge change that took place because the behavior of any one of my employees that were maybe 3, 4, 5 years younger than me was completely different than the baby boomer mindset. Now, I'm a baby boomer, and if there's any baby boomers watching this, how were we taught? We were taught to sit down, shut up, and listen and earn your way through life. You had to pass all the tests, and you would get that corner office maybe in your career someday, and people would look up to you and admire you because you had this solid career, this solid work ethic. Well, along came this new generation, and they were telling me to go to hell in my own company. I mean, it sounds funny now, but that behavior was brand new in 1994, and I scratched my head, fired a few employees, and then I started to realize if I don't change, I'm going to have an empty office. Because they did. They would leave. They would just get disgruntled and say, well, I'm out of here. You don't appreciate me. I'm leaving. Well, at first, I thought that this was, how can I say it, sort of just a fad. Maybe there's something in the Kool-Aid. Maybe it was because they went to tech schools or they had master's degrees or whatever. But I started to realize over the years this behavior was not going to go away. It was not going to change. So I started to do some serious, deep research on the behavioral influences that were taking place throughout the years that would create this generation. And it took me it took 4 years to write the book. But I really started to see that this generation, the generation that we call Generation Y, digital natives, gamers, millennials, whatever you want to call them, they do not think, act, operate, or behave in any way, shape, or form like baby boomers. They're the complete opposite. And I know some people are watching this and going, yeah, you're right. What is wrong with these kids today? My father is a traditionalist, Hungarian, tough as nails. And when I was a kid, he looked at me and he said, you know something? I'm your father. I'm not your friend. When I tell you to get out of bed, you get out of bed. When I tell you to jump, you jump. You ask me how high, you do what I say. And maybe when you're 35, I'll find you interesting enough to have a beer with you, and maybe then we can be friends.
Hang on a second. Hang on. I'm going to write these notes down because I think that might work with my kids, actually.
Well, guess what? I've cleaned it up for your audience. My dad when he opened his mouth, it was filled with a lot of expletives, as we could say. Now, some of you are laughing because you had that similar experience where your father just told you off. This is the way it is. My house, my rules. Too bad. Well, this next generation wasn't raised that way. And I found out, and if I could share this with your audience, I found out that there were 3 major influences that changed the behavior of this entire generation. May I share that with your audience, Mark?
Absolutely. They are dying to. I can tell they're on the edge of their seat.
Good. Well, I found out, some of you are like, well, who cares about the behavior and all this? Well, it's affecting business. It's affecting education. It's affecting parenting all over the world. Because this isn't just in the U.S. It's everywhere. I get phone calls, well, you see my book's coming out in Korea. It's like people are going, what is going on with this generation? The 3 major influences that took place were, number 1, 1977 was when everything changed. What was the number 1 box office movie at the time? Do you remember, Mark? 1977.
77. That was in the Star Wars era, wasn't it?
Exactly. Star Wars came out. Now, you're probably sitting there going, what does Star Wars have to do with this? Well, our minds work in pictures. And Star Wars gave a new generation the ubiquitous idea of how technology can be used day to day in the fabric of our life, basically. Now, if you look around past 35 years or so, the top 10 movies, 7 of which have all been science fiction driven. And what it did is it put in the idea that it's okay to have technology. Technology is cool. And a lot of the things that were in Star Wars and even Star Trek, we have today. Yes, we don't have the Millennium Falcon and we don't have lightsabers yet, but we do have pads that we work with. We have holograms. We also have, we got a glimpse of what digital would be before we knew what digital was. And this influenced an entire generation to just embrace technology. Now, some of you will argue with me and you'll say, no. Star Trek, That's what influenced us. And if you
Buck Rogers, some of the boomers are saying Buck Rogers, right?
If you're a World War II veteran, you're going to say, no, it's Buck Rogers, buddy, bucko, Well, I disagree on one area because I'm a huge Star Trek fan. I wish it was Star Trek. Star Wars was the first science fiction movie to be seen all over the world, no matter where you were in the world.
Right.
If you were in Guam, Australia, Canada, Japan, or some island in the middle of nowhere, eventually you saw Star Wars. Star Trek was only seen in the industrial nations. And what this did is it just put this idea in their head that technology is the most amazing thing. And when I was a kid growing up, that first job, you remember that very first job that you had? You had to listen to your bosses regale you with stories of World War II and the Great Depression and all that stuff. Well, that's kind of over. This generation doesn't want to hear that. The second big influence that came into the household were video games in 1977. Magnavox and Atari brought the video game box into the household. Now, before that, I don't know if you remember this, Mark, but you had to put quarters in a video game and go to the arcade.
I do remember.
Okay, so once the video game came into the household, people were kind of sitting there going, all right, this is addictive. Boomers, we kind of put it on the back shelf and said, this is something that you do on a Friday night when you have a couple of beers with your friends. You pull out the game board and you play Monopoly, right? So what happened is, baby boomers, what's the most interactive thing we could play with? Okay?
Viewmaster.
There you go.
I love Viewmaster.
If you don't know what this is, folks, this is a self-contained slideshow. And you look at this today, and it's a dinosaur, okay? But anybody born after 1977, they received one of these bad boys right here, okay? This has hundreds of controls and things like this. And you're probably thinking, Brad, come on, video games? Are you serious? Well, I want you to think about the behavior in a video game. How do you learn in a video game? The first thing you do is speed is important. You don't read a user's manual on how to play the game. You jump in and make mistakes. Making mistakes is how you learn. Boomers, how are we taught? If you make a mistake, your career is over. This generation has been trained through video games that mistakes are the only way to learn and get good at what you do. And you better make those mistakes quickly, fast, hurry up. Look for the mentors, learn the rules intuitively, make as many mistakes as you can so that you can learn and master the game. And once you have stormed the castle, killed the trolls, and saved the princess, guess what? Forget everything you just learned because the rules change at the next level. Does any of this behavior sound familiar? This is the biggest shift in behavior. Multitasking, that phrase, comes from this generation. They're the video game generation. But one more great influence. You're a father, aren't you, Mark?
I am. 2 kids, yep.
Okay. The big change in 1977 as well, right around this time it came into fashion and vogue, was child-centric parenting and teaching methodologies. And what that did is, for the first time in history, children had equal conversations with mom and dad. Parents were encouraged to ask their children, well, should mommy and daddy get a divorce? What kind of car should daddy buy? We're laughing, but these are the crazy conversations that were happening. Child-centric parenting. My father, when he heard about child-centric parenting, my dad had a PhD in chiropractic medicine and a bachelor's degree in chemistry. So when he put his stamp on child-centric parenting, we listened. Mm. And his stamp was, this is a load of crap. So that was the last we heard of it. But if you think about it, the hierarchy inside the household was flattened. Okay, because now these kids were looking at their parents as peers. Many of the new generation, if you ask them if they were best friends with their parents, or they considered their parents heroes, they will say yes. Now, when they went into the schools, they were encouraged to call their teacher by their first name. Mm. Once again, hierarchy was flattened. There was no authority figure to look up to. There was nobody to fear. They weren't paddled. They were handed a trophy for showing up. And now they can look at the teacher and go, you know what, Becky? I don't really want to learn math today. I'd like to do art. And this is what this generation was allowed to do. They cherry picked their own assignments. And now we wonder today why this next generation doesn't want to sit in a cubicle, doesn't want to listen to authority, walks up to the CEO of a corporation and says, you know, Bruce, I can show you how to run this baby. And that's the huge behavioral change that's taking place. And I don't want anybody, when they listen to this, to just, I know some of you are getting angry. They're like, he's right. You know, we need to storm the castle with torches. I want you to look at this with some neutrality, because yes, some of the behavior can be frustrating, because you're going to be sitting there going, you know, it's 9:30 and Barry's not in, you know. But you can look at this behavior and say, okay, what are we doing differently now? Because they're the next generation that's going to start buying products. They're the next generation that's going to be sitting now in positions of authority. If you understand how they think and how they operate and how they do things and how they buy, how they can be managed better, things like this, you will be the winner in the boardroom, because you're going to have it. You're going to look like a genius, as if you figured it all out, simply because you know these behavioral influences.
Well, you know, it's fantastic to be thinking about all of these differences, because all of that lends to, like you said, behavioral change and how even how they show up to work or when they show up to work,
Right.
and how the older generation has a different kind of work ethic. And I don't even know if that's the fairest way to put it. It's not necessarily, maybe different. I think we used to say better. Now we just say different, right?
It is different.
And so thinking about that, and what I wanted to talk to you about was influence. That's a big topic area for us, and a lot of people want to know, with all this multi-generational stuff going on, and the older generation has different ideas and ethics
Right.
and values than the younger generations do, how do we influence back and forth? So since we're sort of at the older end now in our conversation, let's look at that first and say, if I'm in an older generation, and typically still older generations are in the leadership positions,
Yes,
even though there is, there's a mix here and there, and that may be shifting over time, but historically older generations have been in the leadership positions. Looking down, how do I influence these people coming in? How do I make sure that they're hearing my message of what it is that we want to get done as an organization, what I want to get done as a leader, and influence them in a way that'll motivate them and inspire them to get on board? What are they looking for? How do I communicate that?
Well, first I want to tell you that anybody who's a CEO or in a management position, you have to realize, I know a lot of you are looking at me going, I don't care. It's my way or the highway. That's how we were taught. And by the way, that used to be my management model as well. It's my way or the highway. Well, if you do that, you're going to have an empty office today, because a lot of things are changing. Technology allows an app to replace a lot of things that you needed 5 or 6 people to do only 15 years ago. So an application or a piece of software may be about to replace your whole business model. How are you going to discover that that's out there? You've got to start befriending a lot of these young people, anybody who's 35 and younger. Take them out for coffee or breakfast twice a month. 2 of your confidants who are going to tell you what's going on the front lines. You really are going to have to look at this and research this and listen, and what I like to call reverse mentorship. Instead of standing there going, I invented Teflon back in the 70s, you have to kind of look at these young people, and it has to become a two-way conversation, because they really are on the cutting edge of what's about to take place. If we went back 120 years ago, 150 years ago, and you knew that the automobile was going to replace horse and buggy manufacture, would you still cling to horse and buggy manufacturing, or would you embrace the car? And that's my big argument with my brethren, my baby boomer brethren, is they're the future of management, leadership, and buying power, and we have to kind of get in there now, instead of sitting back going, when they grow up and get a minivan and a mortgage and 2 kids and are tired like I am, then I'll start teaching them. Yeah. We almost have to leap in now, because we've created a big gap of communication between the generations, and we're not passing legacy on, we're not communicating. It's really getting dangerous right now, because are you ready to pass your company on to that next level of leadership? And I'll tell you a story. I'll give you a great example. I was asked to go in and be the keynote speaker at this small finance firm. And these are guys that have been in the business for 35, 40 years, Mark. Okay, they know what they're doing. They've seen the ups and downs of Wall Street. These guys are millionaires already, and they're sitting there. And I purposely went in, and I did not wear a tie. Okay, I wore a nice suit, a handkerchief, stylish shirt. I was looking good, but I refused to wear a tie. And one of the owners of the company is in the front row. His name was Sal, and he looked like 20 minutes into my talk, he was going to explode. He was turning red, like this. I go, Sal, you look like you have to tell me something. Go right ahead. What do you want to say? And he's like, you didn't wear a tie. He was about to explode. Like the smoke coming out in the cartoons. And I looked at him. I got real close. I go, I did that on purpose, Sal. And he just went like this. You could see everything go collapse like this. You did that on purpose? I said, yes. I'll tell you why. How many of you in this room have had your best years ever, the last 2 years financially? Most of the hands shot up in the room. I said, and most of your customers, your clients, your investors are all baby boomers. Am I right? And they're like, yeah, they all agreed on that. I go, how many of you have customers or clients that are under 40 years of age? And all the hands went down in the room.
Wow.
I said, what percentage would you say of investors that are investing in your products and using your services here are 39 years of age and younger? And the answer was about 2%. I said, guys, do you think that's going to change? Because those portfolios of baby boomers who are investing now are about to transform into retirement accounts. Mm-hmm. Where's your next set of customers? And what I found out, we had a really great dialogue, and what it boiled down to is the 2% that were under 39, they were almost all trust fund kids, or where the baby boomer parent knew that investing was so important that they had to take care of the next generation. And I told Sal, I said, if you walk into a meeting with Generation X, Generation Y, and you have a tie on and you have the gold watch, or you invite them to this office and you have mahogany walls and marble floors, and you think that's going to win them over, you've got another thing coming. Because baby boomers, we were taught that marble floors and mahogany walls was a sign of prosperity.
Right.
Well, Generation Y, guess how they see all this? They think you're stealing their money. They think you're wasting your money on mahogany walls and marble floors, and they'd rather keep their money. They don't want to pay you $150 for every single trade. This is the generation that's been raised on E-Trade and the baby, making all the transactions.
Yeah.
And they think they are smarter than you, the investor, the certified financial planner, the banker. And they don't want to have anything to do with that model. So if you're a baby boomer, you're going to have to shift a little bit of that thinking of, well, I've arrived and I've done all these things, and take that tie and burn it. Be stylish, be cool, but there's a different method to reaching the next generation. They're not impressed. They're not impressed by a Mercedes-Benz. They're impressed by how you are personally.
And maybe it's because I'm, toward that older edge than the other, but that E-Trade baby creeps me out
a little bit.
So let's flip the tables a little bit then. If I want to influence the leadership of my company, knowing that they're possibly a generation or two ahead of me in the workforce, and I want to change their mind, or I want to introduce a new idea, or I want to possibly, do something that might change the direction of the company, even in a little tiny bit, little tiny changes. A lot of people are very frustrated that they don't feel like they can bend the ear of their leadership, and sometimes even their direct manager, but also thinking a step or two up the ladder.
Right.
What do they need to think about in terms of how do they get across their message and get people to consider their ideas?
Well, I'll give you a very good example. I was at a summit out in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I was speaking out there, and there was a young man. He was Generation Y. He was getting married. He was a top salesperson at a tech company, and he just could not close this deal with a baby boomer client. And now Chris is probably in his mid-20s. The boomer client is in his late 40s, early 50s. So you see a huge gap generationally there. Now, Chris had spent a year and a half trying to sell this guy. Could not sell him a thing. So after the summit, he contacted me. He said, what do I do? I don't know what to do with this guy. I can't reach him. He won't do what I asked him. I show him, that our products. He just doesn't get it. I said, Chris, with baby boomers, we don't understand why there's such a big deal about technology. You have to not only explain it to us, but show us why it's critical. Show me. You hear that? We have to kind of be shown. Because when you walk into a meeting and somebody, here's a good example. If you went back to the 1970s and tried to explain Facebook to somebody, their head would explode.
Yeah.
But if you could show it to them, they'd be like, whoa, this is mind-blowing. This is going to change the world. And that's kind of what it is. If you're young and you want to impress your boss, don't impress your boss with arrogance, because they might see it as arrogance. Have a proposal. Write it. Pull them in to take them out for coffee. Take them into a meeting. Sit them down and show this and say, I think this would really be a great thing for the company. And there are two things, and only two things a company wants to see. Is it going to make me profitable, or is it going to save me money? That's it. And if you can prove that to your bosses, they're going to look at you and go, that kid's got moxie. He's going places.
Does the generational thing, I know I've read a lot about how, the generation coming into the workforce now, it's not all about money. It's not all about profit. It's about doing meaningful work and things that inspire them and all of that. So when they get an idea, it may not be profit driven. It may not be something that's going to make the company sustainable for the next 50 years. So it still may be a great idea. So are you saying that they need to maybe take a step back and consider, all right, this is a great idea, but how do I get it across that this is important because it's profitable or because it's going to impact the company in a certain way?
Well, it really is. We're in a very strange time right now, and you do have to realize that profit margins are going to drop because we're not getting those billion-dollar sales right off the bat just because we dip our ink into the well. It's just not like that anymore. Even the largest companies, their margins are shrinking. But I can give you a really great example of this. I was speaking at Hofstra University last week, and I'm with a bunch of teachers who really truly understand how technology works and how it's important to keep up with it, especially in the classroom, because you have 20th century workers trying to apply methodologies to 21st century minds, okay? You see the big gap here. And it isn't that this generation is so different. What it is they've been trained differently. So it's a different culture. So these teachers that I was speaking to and with and having a discussion, they get it. They understand today that a teacher has to be an entertainer, has to be a technology enthusiast, at least know some of it, and be able to distribute all the knowledge out digitally as well, and be a nurturer, be a parent almost, be all these different things. So they're freaking out about it, but they know they have to do it. But here's where their frustration was. All the administrators in place are kind of like a ceiling that they're bashing their head against. They have meetings, they go back, they talk to the administrators, they say, look, this is important that we change this, and they yes them to death, and they don't make any changes. And those of you who are teachers right now, you're dealing probably with Common Core and things like that that are now coming into the school system, and they're probably not going to work because they're being mandated from the top down when we have to start looking at things from the bottom up. So the only way that industry is going to change is when Generation Y, the first of which, begins to step into the administrative roles and the leadership positions. And then you're going to see a huge shift in the way things are run. Because let's face it, much of the technological revolution that has taken place, especially in education, if you look at the Khan Academy and things like this, has not only redefined our ability to educate, but it can be done at a lower cost than we had once realized. And here's the other part. We could have done this 15 years ago. There's just so much resistance, whether it's inside a corporation, sometimes even in the collegiate level, sometimes at the educational level, there's all this resistance. And you have a generation that's ready to go. They can see the benefit and the profit center and the speed of utilizing a lot of this technology if you just give them a chance to show you how it can make things faster. Here's a good example. Look at us right now. 25 years ago, I used to do meetings, professional big corporate meetings. What we're doing right now on Skype with this video chat, first of all, back then you could not do it over a phone line.
Right.
The second thing is it would have cost you $30,000 to call up, a satellite company to make that connection, and we'd have a 1 hour window to be able to bounce the satellite and talk to each other, and we'd have to hurry up. And God forbid if we didn't make all the right connections, we'd lose that signal.
And we'd be like all pixelated, and it would be horrible.
It'd be like you're from space, you're talking from space, floating, this. And now we can do it over a Wi-Fi network, phone lines, and we can chat with each other for free.
It's crazy.
This is going to revolutionize the meeting environment, the meeting sector. I mean, Cisco has put billions into this kind of meeting technology where it's just video driven and you can touch screen and you can pass data. GoToMeeting, look at those kind of open source sites where you can do it for free.
Yeah. My 12-year-old daughter, I mean, she doesn't even talk on the phone anymore. She doesn't even text anymore. She FaceTimes with all her friends.
Right.
They're talking face to face. She walks around the house face to face with her friends all day long. It's cool. We live in magical times,
Well, I don't know if anybody remembers the cartoon, the Jetsons.
Oh yeah.
That's beginning, and your children, Mark, and my nephew, who just went off to college, he's in his last year of college. They are those kids we used to make fun of in the cartoons that were playing with a nuclear reactor for their science project in high school. This is the beginning of it. Right. So you're looking at future children who are learning and adapting and growing and working with technologies and thoughts and ideas that I'm not saying we're not capable of understanding them, because look at you and I, we get it, we see it, we're interactive with it. But my big concern is that people at the board level don't see this change as quickly as they should.
So I don't want to keep you all day, even though I could talk to you all day about this. And I think that the issues are that important. And obviously, we're dealing with these every day. I deal with them in my company. I know our followers and our members of Rockstar Academy are dealing with these things as well. And we have the whole range of people involved following us and watching this right now. All the way from that executive level down to the front lines, and from boomers down to I don't even know what is the next generation. What's after the millennials?
After the millennials is NetGen.
Okay, we may not have them on this call yet, but they're coming, right?
Well, here's a good example. Did you see the video on YouTube of the baby who's playing around with the iPad? And then you give him a magazine and she doesn't know what to do with it. Well, that's the NetGen. Exactly. They're not even used to a linear process. They wouldn't even think of putting their data on a laptop. It's in the cloud. And I met with Dell yesterday. I write white papers for Dell's cloud division, and they have issues with the new customers is 37 and younger, and they already get the technology right out of the box. So they don't even need to train their customer. They don't know what to do with that. That's just happening all over the world.
Yeah. So thinking about these different levels and these different generations, even the boomers, there's still room for the boomers to grow and become rock stars in the workplace, and with different roles and different responsibilities than millennials and Gen Y and everything else. So let's walk down through. If I'm a boomer, what does it take for me to be a rock star in the workplace right now?
The best way to be a rock star in the workplace right now is ask yourself how you can make that work environment inspirational. Because the number one complaint that everybody had when they interviewed thousands and thousands of employees all around the world was this: appreciation. People want to be appreciated in the workforce. And it can be a simple thank you. It can be a simple plaque that they get in front of their peers just because they did a great job. And management and executives and, let's face it, boomers, we're usually in the management position because we're making bigger money. We know the companies better. We're in those positions. What it is for us is to come outside of that office on a weekly basis and interact with the front lines. It's kind of like in the old days, the captain of a ship used to walk the deck of the ship. This was an inspiration. You'd be shocked at how inspirational that is to your key employees, and even the employees that are from the mailroom to the boardroom, I always like to say, get inspired and show up on the day of orientation. That 15-minute speech that you give and you tell them, look, this company is your company. You turn it into a dynamo and I'll reward you. That 15-minute speech, you wouldn't believe how far that goes in a person's psyche to say, my God, the owner of the company, the CEO, came down to talk to me.
Yeah.
That means a lot. Now, you need the follow-through, of course. You can't just shut the door and go, I gave my speech. I'm done. You really need to create a different dynamic, results-only work environment where you're more interactive.
Yeah.
And that's hard because I'm a baby boomer. I get how we've all been raised. There's rules. We have to follow those rules.
Right.
Well, those rules are broken.
Okay.
If you're in your 40s, I would say you are a great mediator between generations. You can see the technology, but you also see the command and management structure that needs to be in place.
Kind of the middle child almost. Yeah.
You got it. So you're great at mediating. You're great at moving around, getting people to communicate better, all those kind of things. If you're 30 and younger, let's say down into your 20s, I recommend 100% you convince your boss that you should be in charge of marketing because there's a new way to market, and there's a split in marketing, sales, communication in every company. Take a look at Nationwide. Look at their commercials. Look at Farmers. Look at State Farm. They all have two styles of commercials. One is hip and cool and even funny. And then you have the others that are sitting there going, I like Nationwide's serious commercials. They have blue boxes, and there's a car inside that box and a house.
Yeah.
So they have the serious side and the silly side, and you're going to have to address that. Cadillac was the company that I really enjoy because they decided, what did Cadillac represent to our generation? It was your grandfather's car, the last car you were going to buy before you left planet Earth, basically. And my grandfather bought one. He had to have a Cadillac. Well, it got a reputation as the car the elderly drive. Well, over the years, they knew they had to reinvent the brand. So they hired this ad agency out in Minneapolis, and that ad agency hired a 28-year-old to be in charge of a multi-million-dollar brand campaign. And this young lady at 28, she decided to run around and show everybody, hey, look, this isn't your grandfather's Cadillac. It moves. It does this. And she got people in the showrooms to take test drives and get people excited. That's a Gen Wire who's taking charge of that marketing campaign. Well, guess what? Cadillac sales are up 37%.
Yeah.
So if you're a boomer and you see talent on that front lines, put them in charge of something. Give them extra work. Give them a cause to work for and stay with your company. And you're not going to lose anybody if you get them excited about working in a great environment and a company that rewards them and appreciates them.
One of our biggest clients is Abercrombie, and I know
nice.
People. There's a love-hate relationship with Abercrombie.
Yeah,
especially when you become a parent. But
yes, I know.
They turn that company over to people coming right out of college. I mean, it is people in their low to mid 20s that are running the majority of that company, and they have some older executives and that type of thing too. But they really do. They turn all of the design, the marketing, all of that. It's in the hands of these people that understand what's happening today. And obviously, you go to a company like that, you kind of expect it. But there are lessons I think you can learn on both sides of the generational gap of how to act in those kind of situations if you're in a different, maybe older mindset type of a company.
Well, you know how you used to go to the mall and it used to be packed, and now nobody really goes to the mall unless they want to go to the food court or they want to watch a UFC fight and go to Buffalo Wild Wings. And just remember, these toys that we were raised with formed how we were going to reach each other in our adulthood as well. So the impact and the influence of these things is very important, especially if you realize some of the most dominant pieces of technology and social media that we use today, Mark, didn't exist 5 and 6 years ago.
Yeah.
So you may not even know, and I've seen this at corporations, I've seen this at colleges, They don't even know that their student body, their customers, their employees, everybody at the bottom is communicating constantly on Twitter, Quora, Facebook, things like this, and they're interacting. They're having a conversation. Now, that conversation is not going to be pretty all the time. Sometimes they'll complain about products, but a great product will spread like wildfire. Everybody will be talking about it. Hey, I need a new digital camera. What should I get? Boom. And there's the stream of speak that's going on. We can monitor those conversations today, and Gen Y is built to do this, to monitor and constantly look and seek out new ways to do business. You know, give them something to do. I always say, if you want more work, I'll give you more work. If you're bored to tears, go right ahead. I'll give you more stuff.
Where does patience play into this at all? Like, especially for people coming right into the workforce, they're used to, they're still used to getting a trophy for everything. They're used to advancing through multiple levels of video games in a one sitting, and then they come into a workforce and they get a job, and then there's very little progress and there's very little, reward and recognition. Like, what's the advice for those people kind of coming in terms of what they need to do to be a rock star?
Well, I want you to understand where they're coming from. Remember, if you play 10,000 hours in a video game, you're a superstar in your own mind. And boomers are probably looking at me going, what are you talking about? We used to go to the movie theater to watch Bruce Willis up on the screen save the girl. Okay? Shoot everybody and save the girl. Now, it was vicarious. We would sit and we would watch it in the theater. We'd just look up at that screen and watch it. But this generation, they were immersed in a video game, which made them the producer, the director, the avatar of their own reality for over 10,000 times, And what you see now is someone who actually believes that they are a rock star from the time they're a teenager on, because they've accomplished so many things in this game world. Now add to that something else. Their parents leaned in and told them the truth. Remember, they watched boomers lose their money, go to work hard, and not get ahead, and all of a sudden lose everything in 2008. This generation has had their parents lean in very closely and go, don't do what I did. I wasted my life at some corporate job. I want you to get out there, find what you love to do, Billy. Sarah, you go find what you love to do and don't look back.
Right.
I was lucky. My father sat me down. He said, son, 2/3 of your waking life, you're going to be spent working. So you better figure out what you like to do. and I became an entrepreneur. That's what drove me. It's like my father told me, to find what I love to do. Well, guess what? I was rare. I didn't know this. I was rare amongst all my friends.
Right.
Everybody else was told, get a job.
Get a
Shut
job.
up and get a job. Right.
Good
get
benefits.
a job.
Yeah, all of that. Yep.
And we're finding those benefits are dying on the vine now. And this generation, though, they were all taught to be entrepreneurs. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to become entrepreneurs, but what it does mean is they are independent thinkers. And managing independent thinkers is like herding cats. Okay? They don't make great employees.
Right.
But if you know how to manage an independent thinker, you can get amazing results out of them.
Excellent.
Yeah.
This is fantastic. And truthfully, we've gone way over the time that I promised you we would, and I appreciate you giving us all this extra time.
Sure, Mark.
Because it's A, it's fascinating, B, it's practical, and C, I love hearing you imitate your dad.
Look, buddy. That's how my dad was. It was no nonsense. You remember that show, Stuff My Dad Says?
Oh, yeah.
My dad and I used to call each other afterwards. I go, you used to do that. And he goes, I never did that. I go, yes, you did.
That's awesome.
You had a shotgun in the house. There was an episode about the shotgun in the house. I'm like, you did that. So, good.
So what's next for you? Liquid Leadership and Brad, what do you got on your plate?
I have my next book I'm working on. Also, the education sector is dragging me in because they read the beginning of my book and all of a sudden they go, the light bulb goes on and they go, oh my God, this is how this generation acts. And now I know why. So I'm getting pulled in. And I have to thank my wife, by the way, because she's the one who said, I said, there's too much about Generation Y in here, don't you think? She goes, no, keep it in. So I kept it in, and it turns out that's the real spark, the excitement that people get out of my book, Liquid Leadership. So my next book is going to be talking about disruption, not only just in education, but in everything that's going on right now. We see it. The systems are breaking down. The systems that we had for the 20th century are not really sustainable in the 21st century. They were in the 20th century, but now we're just exploding with so many different ways and methodologies of doing things. So there's that. I'm also a business coach and an advisor, so I have a lot more clients that are coming to me now. They're like, Brad, I want to expand my business, and I don't quite know what to do. I don't understand the markets now. Markets have changed. Methodologies have changed. Getting people to actually work has changed. It's the art of persuasion now. So, I have that I'm also working on, and I'm continuing to do some work with Dell and some other companies. And of course, I run into each other on the speaking circuit, so I'm keynoting, and so I'm busy.
You're very busy. You're an incredibly busy man. I don't know how you have time to write. Hey, Brad, thank you so much for all of your wisdom and for just being so generous with your sharing. I would love to reach back down the line and dig even more into this and how we can figure out how to influence up and down this ladder, up and down the generations, and figure out how we can kind of work even better together. I think that's what being a rock star is all about. So
it is. And I just want to say I'm really honored that you and I met each other, 3-4 years ago, and we stayed in touch. And, it's that rock star quality that you brought to the stage that impressed me, and I see the work that you're doing as well. I think you're really bringing a great service to your people.
Thanks. We'll pop up all your information because his name is Szollose, but it's got a weird, funky Hungarian spelling. So we'll pop that up there, and we'll get your website and all of that on screen so that everybody can find you and seek you out and learn more about you. And again, his current book is Liquid Leadership, From Woodstock to Wikipedia, Multi-Generational Management Ideas That Are Changing the Way We Run Things. This is Brad Szollose. Thank you very much, Brad.
Thank you, Mark. And goodbye to all the rock stars out there.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed Brad and Mark's casual conversation about millennials. 40 years ago, if someone had predicted there would be 26-year-old billionaire CEOs and business could be done from a cell phone or a coffee shop anywhere in the world, most would have laughed at such nonsense. Yet the digital economy and its devices have been thrust upon us suddenly and without warning. Science fiction has become science fact. As Alvin Toffler stated in his groundbreaking work, Future Shock, the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those that cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. A new customer is rising, along with a new workforce, and today's younger leaders will be tomorrow's decision makers. Time to reinvent yourself and your business for the information age. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Don't forget to send an email to brad@liquidleadership.com to get your free report entitled What Every Business Needs to Know About Millennials, How Technology Transformed a Generation and How That Impacts Behavior, Management Interaction, and Expectations. If you are interested in booking Brad Szollose as a keynote speaker for your next event or to schedule a generational workshop summit, send an email to brad@liquidleadership.com. or go to www.liquidleadership.com. Thank you. We look forward to hearing from you.